Hi, I'm Pittaway, and this video is about transitional vulnerabilities. It's part of a series, and this particular video I'll be looking at Murray Park in Scotland and nature-based solutions and what are the vulnerabilities in the space. So to give a slight background, we're going to be looking at this park and what kind of stresses it has, its capacity gaps, and also its adaptation to all of these vulnerabilities. So to give a little bit of background to Murray Park, it's 31 hectares. It was originally purchased and gifted um, by Charles Murray, a famous poet in Scotland. The park has a variety of ponds. It has two burns. It has clear felled conifer wood and exotic conifers and Scot pines, a variety of different trees and shrubs and grass area. So it's quite diverse when it comes to the vegetation of this park. So to look at the vulnerabilities that are sitting in this area, I've broken them up into these um, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vulnerabilities. Firstly, environmental, we're looking at storm damage in this area. Knowledge, there might also be like loss of traditional ecological expertise as people move away from it, or those that have worked on the park previously, maybe pass on or move from the town. There's also temporal climate changes and mismatch between what is growing and what is needed. There's also technical issues, inadequate deer protection design and path erosion. There's quite a strong dependency on grant cycles. There's also expenses and costs for maintenance. There could also be stakeholder conflicts, those that are not involved would want to be part of it, and what they feel that the park should be providing. And then there's also loss of cultural memory, those that may not even know that the park once was gifted by this famous poet. So these are some of the vulnerabilities that I've identified. So to give an example of a cascading failures, there was a very strong storm Arwin in 2021, caused a lot of damage. And from this, they had to clear some of the areas, and a lot of the park became more open. And what we found that the dense growth areas creates way more reliance or mutual shelter, so that the trees amongst each other and the rooting systems kind of bind and create a strong defense for future storms. But as soon as you remove open areas, you're opening up to even stronger and more design. It's like you're opening up wider spaces for the strong winds to actually push through into. So these strong storms have actually removed some of the canopy areas, open canopy areas, and some of the remaining trees suffer sudden and wind exposure. So future storms may even cause more damage. And so in order to grow trees at the rate of the storms are coming, there is this mismatch that is occurring in this woodland. So if we look at the biological gap and some of the biological issues here, we've got deer browsing pressure. So if some of these open areas that have been damaged, they're growing new trees. These new trees, the deers might be actually causing too much damage on eating the new saplings. There's the canopy dynamics, where there is also weed competition, and some of the trees themselves haven't actually fully closed together, or the root structures underneath haven't actually bound nicely together. There's also the network disruption, with which, like I spoke about, the mycorrhizal under the soils has been disrupted through trees being removed, and this takes a long time, and it takes over 50 years for some of these forests to actually create this network and strength amongst the trees. There's also this water table paradox, and some of the discussion that we've been having is that Murray Park could have two extremes. It could be very dry one year due to climate change, or very wet, and each brings its own vulnerabilities and problems within this area. A rising water table, for example, would probably make it very difficult for people to use and enjoy the park, or a very dry area would, or if, if the water table actually had to dry up completely in a dry time of climate change, the trees themselves may actually start deteriorating. So if we look at the winners, losers, and the unheard, firstly, there's probably a temporary decline, and when it comes to accommodation or homes for red squirrels, for example, um, um, and the woodcock, for example, ground dependent on wetlands and woodlands and extensive wood path networks. So these are animals that are sensitive to these changes. So if the water changes, some of these animals might not be able to create homes or find the food in their spaces. But in these changes, there are some that may also be what we call winners. For example, like the woodpecker, thrive on increased deadwood. So, the trees that are falling over through the storms, they're benefiting from that. The flycatchers also. And the butterfly expands into new open grasslands that are opening up in the woodland. So even though there is kind of a transition and a change within this woodland, some animals are benefiting, and those that potentially are being put under strain or are vulnerable to these changes. There's also the social friction of the in-between. So if you have open spaces and you are planting and you are working in this woodlands, aesthetically it doesn't look good, all right? It could look messy, and for a long period of time, if they are looking at removing certain trees that actually shouldn't be there, the park itself may not look aesthetically pleasing, and that may take a long time before the park actually then stabilizes. The curling pond, which is a social space for a lot of the people to come to. And we've spoken about climate change, and one of the things is that the curling pond is not freezing up like it used to. So it's also reducing the attraction of people actually going to the park. And it's a strong historical memory that goes along with this curling pond that potentially could be a loss. And then we've also looked at things like volunteer burnout. This is a vulnerability where maybe that it's struggled to motivate people to actually come in and support and assist with a tree planting, and there's probably a lot of work that needs to be done. Final slide, yeah, I would want to talk about, again, to end off on a positive note, how do we bring all these vulnerabilities to a form of like resilience? So this resilient mixed woodland dominated by native broadleaves, and layers provide a structural space against wind, and it's an efficient resource to capture and diverse multi-species habitat. That's important space, and that's the target state that we're looking at. The climate reality, there's no stable historical baseline to return to. So today's nature-based solution must be capable of absorbing anything that looks unexpected, unpredictable. So it's important that through these vulnerabilities, we need to work towards a state of resilience, and for things that maybe that are unseen. Final takeaway is that acknowledging the fragility of this transition isn't a weakness. So it's exact process that builds sociological and ecological memory, forging a community capable of thriving through the profound shifts of the 21st century. And this is really an important part to bring everybody together, to acknowledging what the woodland really needs in this time, is part of this process.